I ended up being an intern, or shadowing the S&C coach with Donegal, and that's when I first got involved in 2011. So even thinking that far back, I was trying to think, what did I take from it? What was the big take homes for me as an intern? At the time, I was primarily involved in the gym sessions, okay, because that was, I suppose, my interest coming out of university and stuff. And I wasn't driving, so it wasn't really feasible to get to all the pitch sessions and so on because I was so young. But the one thing that really opened my eyes up was, I suppose, the other coaches programming. At the time, I might have had a bias, or I might have had a preconception of what I thought strength and conditioning was and what it needed to be. So it basically it eliminates that, because you're going into the coalface, you're going into the trenches, you're seeing what, I suppose, senior inter-county footballers are actually doing and what their coaches is doing with them to apply that. Back then, I suppose in 2011, 2012, it was long before, all these apps that have come out recently. The training load monitoring techniques was literally pen and paper. So the guys were working off programs, they were reviewing the weights they lifted last week in their training diary, and they were writing down the numbers they were lifting this week, and they were given, the equivalent of an RP. It wasn't even an out and out RP at the time. It was basically if they struggled for the last couple of reps, or, if it was the last 3 reps, they made a note it was the last 3. If they failed in a rep, they recorded that they failed on the 9th or the 10th rep, or whatever it may be. So again, very, very basic stuff, but it was an introduction to how these guys were monitoring their progression. I suppose coming out from an undergrad, you learn about this world of block periodization, and how most teams will train, anatomical adaptation to go to maybe hypertrophy and the muscular endurance and the strength and the power. I suppose what I seen when I went to the intercounty scene from a very early stage was it was very agile. It wasn't so much that guys were training in blocks. They were very adaptable. In pre-season, they were probably training more a concurrent type model where they were touching on all those qualities, and based on the player, obviously then it was a wee bit more individual. So there was never really a set block of work that any time I was involved, the intercounty team really went after. I suppose the biggest eye-opener for me, and I don't know anybody that has come across some of Jim's kind of protocols before when it came to, I suppose, the conditioning type stuff, was like, it made me question sports science in every facet. The stuff that you read about, the stuff that we were being taught, it all went out the window for a lot of the training content and a lot of the training sessions I was seeing. It just literally went out the window in terms of, the types of ASD work these guys were doing. They were doing a lot of, your 200s, 300s, and, the recovery times that they were supposed to be getting by the book, they weren't getting them, but they were still performing the reps, rep after rep. So again, it made me probably question a wee bit in terms of, the academic side of sports science to what was happening practically on the field. And obviously, in the first couple of years, this team had success as well. So again, it was probably putting you in a different mindset in terms of, so what is sports science telling us versus, what's actually getting results. So again, it was very challenging at the time to try and get my head around, what I thought was right and what was being done and what was happening. Obviously, seeing other coaching styles was a big thing, and I do think it shaped me as a coach. Seeing how other coaches worked from a very early stage of my career, you pick up wee traits and you pick up how they were coaching. So Jim would have been renowned for his, I suppose, his psychological kind of prowess in terms of he had a master's in sports psychology. So how he spoke to players, when he spoke to players, when he shouted at players, was all a very unique, I suppose, style to his coaching. And again, it's something I picked a lot of things up in terms of, I would like to think I'm a soft-spoken coach, but when you have to shout or when you have to raise your voice, that you get an effect from it. So again, I definitely learned the different styles and the different techniques in coaching during that internship phase also. And the big thing for me was probably, being on the gym floor or being on the pitch, was getting to know the players and the athletes. So it was building trust. So if you're going in as an intern, you kind of have to muck in. You have to, if whether it be spotting the bar or whether it's loading plates or whether it's helping with dumbbells, try to get to know the players, because as I talk a wee bit later, you'll see where it ended up for me in terms of just reaching out and getting to know the players. And, don't be shy about it. Maybe, it's your nature to be shy, but try not to be. Really, really get stuck in if you do get a chance to shadow or you do get a chance to gain some experience, in such a field. So off the back of my internship, so again, I was in and out, supervising regional sessions, helping out where needed be. Off the back of me knowing the players so well, when I suppose the time came for a change of setup and a change of management, when Jim McGuinness stepped aside and the new management team come in, because the players, I suppose, knew me, there was a bit of a trust, there was a bit of a rapport built up there. I was nominated, and I suppose I accepted the job of coming in as the lead S&C coach to Donegal in 2015. I spoke about this on another podcast before. So I basically inherited the beating All-Ireland finalists from 2014. So it's a very daunting first job to get, to be handed what would be considered the second best team in Ireland in terms of Gaelic football. So yeah, it was being thrown on at the deep end, as the title of the slide suggests. Why was it so, I suppose, daunting? Again, the players had massive expectations. They've just reached an All-Ireland final. So again, anything less than that the following year was going to be a failure, so to speak. So you're kind of, you had to try and manage that expectation, given that there was a change in management. Me being a first-time S&C coach coming into that environment, I had to try and manage their expectations of how much I can do in a given year and so on. As well as the players' expectations, the manager was coming in with his new ideas. So again, he was going to ultimately dictate how I worked as a coach. And his expectations was going to be, it was going to dictate a lot of my, I suppose, roles and responsibilities within the setup as well. And again, it's important to remember that as much as you like to think you might be a head of a department or a lead, the buck will always stop at the manager, or, whoever's above you. The big dilemma for me was, I suppose, where we were off the back of that All-Ireland defeat. We had what was considered an aging squad, so we had a lot of players the other side of 30, and they had if you want to call it, a very specific training history, given that they've had the same S&C coach prior to me for the last 4 years. So they, were doing a lot of the same stuff. And again, for them, it was successful. They won an All-Ireland. They won 3 Ulsters during that 4-year campaign. So obviously they felt what they were doing was right at the time. And again, who was I to argue to say it was right or wrong? But I was coming in with a different approach. So I had to obviously sell that to them, the older players, that is. On the other side of that, the new management did take in players that weren't a part of that 4-year journey. So they were kind of developing players, and they all had a quite low training age. So again, that was very challenging in terms of straight away you have 2 very different groups or 2 very different dynamics within a group. So it was something I had to factor in my first year. So how or what it led to was basically small group or very individual programming for each member of the squad. So it wasn't a case that we could just apply the same type of training across the board. And as much as people like to think that's, that doesn't happen, for a lot of teams, it is what happens. There's a program put in place. Yes, sets and reps and stuff might be tweaked, but a lot of the time it's maybe movement based, and they're ticking all the same boxes. I've just used this picture kind of, I suppose, as a wee bit of an example of that. I've circled Colm Anthony McFadden. This is actually Colm Anthony McFadden's last game with Donegal. We just got beaten in an All-Ireland quarter-final in Croke Park. So again, he was at the end stage of his career. That was him coming off the pitch. Behind him, there's a young lad called Keelan McGonigal. So he was only new into the panel this year. Again, very, very different ends of the spectrum. One guy finishing his intercounty career, the next guy not even making the match day squad, although he was developing into a player. And the reason, this picture stood out today in this given week, I suppose, is Keelan, for anybody who watched the Ulster semi-final at the weekend, is now an established midfielder with Donegal, the last couple of seasons, and he actually got the goal at the weekend. So I thought it was, a nice way of explaining the dynamic of the older aging player, the young development player, and the journey that they go on to become a senior player as well, as much as, it is challenging for the coaches to get them there. So what dictated the program at the time for me, and I've said this quote so many times, that there's no magic bullets. A lot of us as S&C coaches at the very, very basic level will focus on a certain amount of qualities. At the given time for us, it was an athlete's mobility, their speed components, their agility or change of direction components, strength ultimately led to their power, and then their conditioning, whether that be isolated type conditioning or it was conditioning with the football. bang in the middle of that then is their sports specific movement skills. Okay, so having all these other qualities will obviously improve that middle hexagon there as well. How we went about that, I suppose, is your typical athletic motor skills. In the gym environment, we focused on our strength qualities, so the likes of our bilateral and unilateral strength, upper and lower body, our throws, or catching, jumping and landing, accels, decels, change direction was obviously all primarily based on the pitch then. And again, I don't think there's anything different there to what anybody's promoting or what anybody's doing. A lot of our programs are all made up of the same, and it's just how we go about it then, in terms of our logistics when we do these stuff, what type of quality do we want out, or what kind of strength quality we want out of it, and so on. And again, people think at intercounty level, they think big pretty gyms and people working through power racks. Here's, I suppose, a snapshot of reality of what an intercounty S&C session might have looked like at a given time. So this is my own gym here that I showed you in the picture earlier. So again, we're working off 4 squat racks, and we have to try and get a full session into these players. This was done on a Saturday morning, I think. The boys were coming in middle and fresh, so there was room there for a wee bit of power and a wee bit of work put into them. So again, what that might look like, it looks like a bit of a chaos, but if we break it down to, if I go back to what we're talking about here, and we break that down, we have some step ups with it being resisted with a band with some hip lock work. So again, that would tie in their speed type work and our unilateral strength, more knee dominant type stuff. We would have a power push press. And again, that would be focusing on, you want to think it's upper body power, but it would be a total body power type lift. Working in some primary strength work. So in this particular day, we're working off the floor and we're working in our hip dominant type strength. And again, you can see me bang in the middle of it there. Again, no matter the age of the player, we're always trying to coach. Within that, then you can see that there's guys who's not glute bridging, they're doing some individual work, again, still within the main components of the session. So they're working here with our physio at the time, Cal. Down the back wall, we're working some rotational kind of med ball work. Again, it'll target obviously your core muscles. And then to finish off the session, we just tick off some upper body work again. And it was as simple as just adding some bands to our push-ups to add some resistance. And again, we were getting a lot of good work done in that given session. If you kind of set the scene, 2 speakers on the go, music blaring, and that would have been done almost, as much as you go against it, it would have been done nearly like a circuit style, where you'd be on a running clock, starting a set maybe every 90 seconds, and then it's just a rotated type thing. So again, try not to conflict. Exercise wouldn't conflict with each other, so they just roll through it, or a bit of a flow to it.